Welcome to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, here to share some amazing conversations. We're talking business, health, making and saving money, or starting something epic. Think of this as your go-to spot for stories that do a lot more than just kill time. They spark ideas, give you a boost, and perhaps even change the way you look at the world. I'm pulling in the experts, the thinkers, the doers, and the dreamers. We're about to dive into stories that open doors and ideas that light up your brain. Here we go. Welcome, everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, and with me today is my guest, Leigh Burgess. Welcome to the show, Leigh. How are you today?
Thank you very much. Doing great.
Excellent. And I am so honored to have you on the show, Leigh, and excited about our conversation today. You are the founder of Bold Industries Group, and I absolutely want you to share how this all came to be. But you're a thought leader, super connector, like game-changing powerhouse. And I want you to really tell us how this came to be, what led you down this path, because you're about supporting others in their bold journey. And so tell us, Leigh, like, how did this come to be?
How did it all start out? Yeah, so I formed Bold Industries Group, which is an acronym. It's big. So thinking big and thinking bold, really, I think I've done that all of my life. But I think I got to this moment in 2020, mid 2020, a really crazy year for the world, where I was experiencing an acute level of burnout that is undescribable in certain areas, but it just was a place I needed, I guess, to get to make that decision, that bold decision to stop doing what I was doing, which ended up me actually resigning without a role. And I don't say anyone should do that. I think I just got to the point where that was what I had to choose. I had to choose me, my family, and my relationships really to get back to who I was. I just wasn't me anymore. And out of that, I realized that I had really neglected my mindset and the wellness. And so when I say wellness, I mean emotional, mental, emotional, spiritual health that we have in addition to our physical health. And I had really put everything that was important on the back burner and had really focused in on my job, a very important job, but one that had overtaken my life. So I wanted to take my life back and be more me than anyone else. And that really was the first step for me in being bold and creating the company that I created. But I also knew that I couldn't just jump right back in and be a consultant or be a coach or do other things unless I actually took care of myself. And so it took some time to heal and nurture all the places I had been from a perspective of back burning, moving things to the front burner, experience life, bringing joy back into my life. And what happened during that time is I became very creative in wanting to learn what I could offer the world and serve others doing, and created that bold framework, which is believe, own, learn, design. And then I actually went through the framework myself during that time period, which helped hone it and I think make it applicable to organizations and individuals who wanted to take the next bold step towards possibility or curiosity into what they could do next.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you for sharing that
Sure.
journey with us. And what was the field of work that you were in previously before you launched the
Yeah.
Bold Industry Group?
Yeah. So most of my life, I've been in healthcare and specifically clinical research operations. So running large teams and being in charge of very important clinical trials that help individuals either have hope or have a disease state or be receiving treatment that helps them in a certain way. And well, half of my career was in cancer, specifically cancer clinical trials, and the other half was really across all disease areas. Large teams with high expectations and outcomes that impact human lives. And so no pressure there in the sense of that. But a good place for me to be as an innovative agitator and someone who really wants to push for quicker, better, faster at a higher level. And I think a lot of my success in my career came from that. But I think also what I realized towards the time that I was thinking about resigning and getting to the point of burnout is that quicker, better, faster, higher level also was used to a level that was a detriment versus a positive. So I think for me being in that industry, an incredible industry, I still do consulting in that industry and area, but now I do it differently. I do it through something I call a D90. So it's designed is the D and 90 is 90 days. And I work in organizations for 90-day strategic sprints. It's a different way of doing consulting in healthcare because healthcare usually has consultants come in for months at a time. which is there's some great companies that do that. But what I would find is I usually then didn't have the bench strength or the ability to keep up the whatever we had started. And then we'd either fall back or lose traction because we couldn't either afford it or didn't have the people anymore. So wanted to change the way that we consult in healthcare. So be innovative and then work with people who wanted to move pretty fast, wanted to be agile and use that design thinking really to create solutions every day and to mid-course correct daily versus every 3 months or a couple weeks. And really kicked off really the consulting within the Bold Industries Group as the first thing that I offered. And my goal was just to make what I made where I worked before.
Thank you for explaining that to us. And
Sure.
what you were doing before was absolutely important work,
Hmm.
but it sounds like it became overwhelming. It took over your life to a level that you were feeling like it was not good anymore for you mentally, physically, maybe emotionally.
All the above. Yeah. I
And
had
so,
taken on more responsibility than I needed to, which I've learned now, but during it, it's a very responsible job anyway. You have a lot of responsibility in a role like that. And I think I just took on responsibility in addition to my own that was someone else's or another team's or trying to prevent something bad from happening or trying to create the most optimal perfect situation. And I think some of my perfectionism also, I think, which I didn't know I had till after, I think that also was creeping in. And so I think that's really where it was. It was just, I was taking on way more than I needed to. And then additionally, just that year, I think if it was working really well in 2020, the situations we were in, it just made things better. If it wasn't working or things weren't, whether it's a relationship or your job or how you operated in your world, like the situations we were in 2020 exacerbated the current state. So mine was not good. And then 2020 just took it to another level of not good.
yeah. And I think a lot of us experienced that. And it
Mhm.
was, I think, a catalyst for many people to re examine their
Mhm.
lives, right? And just really look at what's working, what's not working, and make some bold changes. And
Right.
it sounds like you did not have any plan B in place when you
Yeah.
made the decision that you were going to leave your well established career and launch this.
Hmm.
And so, maybe share with us, like, what gave you the courage to do that, first of all? And I think this ties into the being bold, right? So tell us about it.
Yeah. So it certainly wasn't the norm for me. So I'm usually a plan A through Z. What if it doesn't go right? Worst case scenario type of thinker. And that comes also, I think, from the field I was in of making sure we protect and keep people safe and do our best work. And so I think it came from that. But quitting your job without having a job, again, not recommended, but it was the choice I needed to make. Being bold is a choice. And so that choice I made really was for me. And because I knew that if I didn't get back to me, I couldn't be a good wife, a good mom, a good daughter, a good friend. Like I just really was tanking in all of those areas, but I wasn't good to myself. Like my self talk, the way that I operated, like I had put so much pressure on myself, I think from a perfectionist standpoint and also from just wanting to do a really good job and to make sure people saw that we were doing so much good that it just became too much. And that too much became extremely unhealthy. So not having a plan wasn't the plan, I think. And also people have asked, well, is this something you wanted to do all of your life? And I said, no, I think we all have those moments of when I can, or if I was, or when the time comes. I, of course, said things like that, but I never thought I could be an entrepreneur. Like, I really felt that was a very unstable, risky way to live. And how could I have stable income for my family, those types of things. And I think what I learned is while one working for someone else, I think in our world today, we've also learned that's not always the most stable state and you're not always going to be in air quotes in control of kind of the decisions and things that happen. Same thing, being an entrepreneur, it's not always the most stable, risk less thing. It's going to have risk, but I felt more in control of my world in being an entrepreneur. And I think what happened is once I gave that notice, once I made that decision courageously with me and my family's support, I was able to think differently. Like I felt like doors opened in on my mind or areas of my brain lit up that had been dimmed or not been able to even think about it. So it's hard to explain, but it was a very freeing, although frightening time of figuring things out. But I knew I've operated in a growth mindset that I would just figure it out, right, left, forward movement. And that's what I did. So by the time that I actually had my 30 days notice and left, I had already incorporated and was ready for the next step. And I think that was the key thing of I didn't have to have it all figured out, which most of my life I figured I had to have every step figured out. It was just the next step and then the next step. And so started working through that. And then the first stop I had was what are my beliefs doing to me right now? My mindset and how it's supporting me, or is it harming me? Is it holding me back? And really thinking about that. And that's really where the BOLD framework was born, is really starting with me doing a belief audit on myself.
Yeah, excellent stuff, Lee. Thank you for sharing that with us. And there was so much in there that you said, and this notion that it's more stable to work for someone else is
Mhm.
have this job that you go to, you think it's just always going to be there. And many of us know that's not the case. And entrepreneurship, being your own boss, often seems very frightening because there's a lot of unknowns. However, you've got a lot of control, right? Because
Mhm.
you are in charge of you and what you're doing and how much of what you're doing, which can become too much at some points. You've got to establish some boundaries about what this is my family time, this is my work time, or whatever. But
Mhm.
again, you've got a little bit more control, or a lot more control about the trajectory of your life, right?
You're in control of your time, which is a really weird thing to say as an adult. But at 48, I was like, wow, I could be anything I wanted to be. I could do whatever I wanted to. I could go to sleep whenever I wanted to go to sleep and wake up whenever I wanted to wake up. It at first, it's this weird feeling of freedom that you don't even know what to do with, because it's like I'm very used to being in meetings from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Zoom,
Mm.
zoom, zoom, don't eat lunch, drink coffee all day, get it done. The more I meet, the better we are, like all of that. And then you go from that life to, okay, I select who I want to meet with. I need to create and understand what my products and services are. You start thinking about your marketing funnel. There's all this stuff that you've never really thought about. And the things that I've built over the first 4 years of my business, and we'll celebrate 4 years in September. So we're coming into it. I never even thought I would be doing. I was just, I want to be a consultant. I want to be doing what I was doing because I felt, and I do feel good at my job. And so I wanted to help others differently. But I think it was figuring out like how to frame my time, and then realizing that I did need routine. I did need some of the structure that I had, but I also didn't need to fill my days with meetings. And I, yeah, eventually worked up to my optimal schedule, and my optimal schedule is a really light Friday and a really light Monday, and sometimes no meetings, or maybe one or two, but they're selected or chosen. And then really having time in between meetings, which sounds silly, but I literally did not. And many of us on who are listening have back to backs. And so I used to wear that like some badge of honor. Wow, I was in back to backs all day today. Like with myself, I wasn't like talking to other people about it, but it wasn't doing anything that was good or positive. I was getting a lot of meetings in, but then I would be working at night to make up for all the time I was in meetings. So I think I needed to retrain myself of how I used my time, and then what I used my time for. And then this weird thing of figuring out, what do I do for fun?
Mm.
Because I didn't really do anything but work. So like when someone would ask me that question, I really couldn't answer it. And so I had to really work on that. And I think you mentioned something like it can creep back. Just because you had burnout once doesn't mean you won't burn yourself out again. But it's knowing the signs and understanding when it creeps in or starts to come back, that you are intentionally noticing it, and then you do something about it. Because when you're an entrepreneur, you're the boss. So like
Mhm.
you are the one that has to be in control of really managing you.
Yeah, and you mentioned early on about perfectionism, and
Mhm.
this absolutely can come into play as your own boss because now everything is riding on you.
Mhm.
Every aspect of your business, the look, the feel, what you're putting out, everything comes back on you. And if you've got that perfectionism, thing going on, it can take up a lot of your time if you're going back and like trying to fix every little thing or make sure before you even put something out that it's perfect. And
Mhm.
so working on your mindset, and you mentioned that, is absolutely imperative in making sure that, what you're doing is healthy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't
Well,
even know I had it, honestly. So in that time period of renewal and nurturing my mindset and my wellness, I got my own coach. And I think everyone needs a coach in different times of your life. Well, you'll have a different person most likely. And I think for me, it was a time of figuring out who I was, nourishing who I was, and building my business because I wanted to be efficient because I had a runway and using savings and some of our retirement, and that's what I had. So I knew I couldn't take a year off and go backpack Europe or anything. I just knew that that's a good thing, but I just knew I couldn't financially do that. It was important for me to be doing things in a way that was parallel. Plus it felt right to me. So I was doing some exploring and being curious and what could I be and what do I like to do and where does it vent over my passion and what I'm good at and what I think my purpose is? And then that's it. That's what I should do. And sometimes it comes to you just through your work and through steps that you're taking. It doesn't come instantaneously. And that's where you need to start before you feel ready. And I know many people have heard this, but it is so true. Like you just got to start. And I think that helps people, again, that right, left, move forward, figure things out, and then move to the next step.
yeah, good stuff, Leigh. Thank you. And you mentioned the BOLD framework. And
Mhm.
so talk us through that. What does that mean exactly? It stands for believe,
Believe.
own, learn, design.
Mhm. Yeah, so when I was trying to figure out my next step, I really started with my beliefs as the foundation of what I was going to do and how I was going to operate in the world and who I was gonna be at 48 and how I was gonna live my life. And I had to unpack really a lot of my beliefs and understand were they helping, harming, or hindering me moving forward. And then I think ownership really was the next step. I love a good acronym. So creating an acronym and a framework from the word bold was really what I wanted to do. And so ownership was big. And what I realized about myself was what I was owning wasn't mine to own. And that really was a big part of my burnout. And then I was not owning my successes at all. Like you did something great, wonderful. Like I celebrated for about half a second, then moving on to the next. Like I really wasn't celebrating small or big wins in my life. And I really needed to be present and intentionally start celebrating those things. And then I think I've always been in a growth mindset mode, but we can all fall into fixed every now and then, but primarily in growth mindset. And that's what the learning quadrant of the framework is all about is how do you apply what you've learned? Are you really doing things over and getting the same result and still continuing to do it? As I look back, I see some places where I was doing that. And I think now it'd be interesting to place me now, the me today, into some of these organizations that I was in where I was feeling that friction, where I was feeling that bumpiness of like me wanting to be probably more entrepreneurial or just more innovative at a higher pace, faster and quicker. I think I would have a little bit more patience now. I probably would observe a whole bunch more and I would listen a whole bunch more. So I think that comes with your experience, right? I wouldn't change anything because I learned from all of it. And then the D is design and realizing that you are designed as a human being a certain way to do the things that should be aligned with your passion and purpose, which should bring you joy. And what does that look like? And if it's not your job, are you doing things within your hobbies or your volunteering or with your family that are bringing you joy that really align your life? And I think that's for me what I was going through when I created that framework and then creating the book was really to help people understand too that it's possible and that you can do it in a small step or a big step as long as you're taking those steps.
Yeah, good point. And thank you for explaining what the acronym of BOLD and what each of those things means exactly and kind of how they sort of developed you experiencing these things through your life and through your learning and creating this. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that you said. First of all, this idea of how thinking differently, you had to, as you were designing, like how I'm going to create my business and run this business, you had to think about things differently. And I think
Mhm.
that always opens our mind, expands our mind, and gives us an opportunity to see things differently, learn how to handle things differently, explore things differently. And all of that, I think, is a good thing. And continuing to learn. And I think that's always important through our lives. There's oodles of research and studies that show that continuing to learn through your entire life keeps your brain healthy. So I'm all about learning, reading, studying new ideas, whatever. I love it. And so design, I want to ask you, was that kind of based on the concept of human design?
Mhm. Yeah, it was, and it was something that I was exposed to initially, I think through my coach, but it was also my love of design
Mm.
and like interior design. So I love to create spaces that feel like I call it earthy luxury, like just feeling like it's real. It's like giving you a big hug and you just want to sit in that space and be there. And it's just another level of being. And I know that sounds a little woo, but it really was. Like I just love to create spaces like that. And I think what was the first space that I created after I resigned was my office.
Mm.
And so it was like, wow, like I could, like I have this huge amethyst that's in the middle of my desk and like just creating a space that felt good. So I was like, well, maybe I'll be an interior designer because I really love to do this. And I think I'm pretty good at it. And then I realized like how hard it is to get into the industry, where you start and all that. And I realized very quickly I could not make a living where I needed to be at that point. So it's interesting how the bold table and the bold retreat that I've created is all about the spaces we're in, is all about the feel that you have when you're in the community, when you come together. So I think it's manifested in different places in my company now. But I think it was a combination of the interior design thinking and, do you have white space at all in your head? Like, or have you filled it all with pictures and they can't even see? Do you have harmony? Do you have balance? These are really some of the things within interior design that you think about. When it comes to human design, I had never really been exposed to that until I did a reading with recommendation from my coach. And I think what was fascinating about the human design reading for me is that I did it and I was like, oh, that's why that feels the way that it feels, or that's why maybe I wasn't able to complete something like I wanted to. And then I instantaneously said I would love for my daughter and my husband to do it. And so they both had readings, and it was just this most fascinating thing. And anyone who's done human design reading, we have these channels.
Mm.
And what happened was, I'm a little bit of a geek. So, like, we put all of our human design charts up on the TV and we're like looking at them in like on a presentation mode. And it was just interesting where my channel would stop, like either my husband's or my daughter's would continue. So, my daughter is my partner in the business. And so, I'm a very big picture person who can get down in the details, but I don't want to live there. I don't want to stay there. Like, I might break out in hives. If I live there too long, I want to get back up. She is extremely detail oriented and knows things to the 10th of an inch. So that's not me, but I need someone like that, obviously, in my business. So it was just interesting to see where mine ends and begins and how we actually complement one another. And then where we may have a little bit of disagreement or something like, as maybe because we both have a strong area of a particular channel. So it was a combination of the interior design, designing your life the way that you want to do it, meaning having control, having the ability to say what you want, and then the human design. So it's a combination of those three things.
Cool. Well, thank you, Leigh, for explaining that to us and sharing how that kind of came to be. And the idea of learning about yourself and about your daughter and your husband, I think always helps us to be better
Mm-hmm.
together, right? Because we know our strong suits, we know maybe areas that we're weak in, and we know the other person's as well. And so we really can come together and work a little bit more harmoniously together. So I think it's always a good idea to understand about yourself and your, significant other or your children to
Mhm.
have better relationships. So I love that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned briefly in there about your forthcoming book. And so I
Mhm.
want you to share that with us now. I know you said it's on pre-sale right now. It's coming out November 19th,
Yeah.
and it's Be Bold Today, Unleash Your Potential, Master Your Mindset, and Achieve Success. So please, Leigh, share with us what inspired you to write this and what can the listeners discover in the book?
Yeah. So it's something that kind of came into play probably in 2020 when I decided to resign and start the company. And I said, I want to write a book, but I needed to really have the experience to go through several years of doing what I was doing, working with other people, also hearing their stories. I mean, it's one of the reasons I created the podcast was just to amplify boldness and things that people were doing. But I took the time. So it took 4 years to get to that point where was feeling I was ready to and prepared to write the book. And I think the primary reason I wrote the book was just so people are aware of the possibility that it can happen, that you can live that life aligned with your passion and purpose and design it the way that you want to. And you can start today with a small step. And I think I also wanted to demystify what it means to be bold because I think sometimes it can get a bad rap. And it is, I think, something that needed to be said. So I talk about the myths around boldness, like boldness has to be loud, or if you're bold, you're always confident. To be bold, you go alone. You're too old to be bold. Those are four myths right there that I think that people need to realize. And I think the other one is really thinking that boldness is looking without leaping and you just do it and you don't ever think about it. And it's one of the most thoughtful, pragmatic processes potentially that anyone goes through in their life. Because, for example, it'll just take mine. You're resigning without a job. I didn't just do it. I really thought, okay, what do we need to do? What does this look like? When I sought feedback from my family and my loved ones of what was I going to do, the one I was the most nervous to tell was my mom. And she was probably the first person that said, I'm so happy you did this because you're going to be healthier. I think just knowing that it's possible, and sometimes we talk ourselves out of making those bold moves. And the book really guides you through the framework, talks about there's a heavy section of the book around our beliefs because I think it's the foundation and really the springboard for everything you do after and the actions that you take. And so really it focuses in on that. And then there's resources and activities to really move yourself and go through the bold framework along the way. And if you pre-order, you get the workbook along with it.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, Leigh. I appreciate that and sharing that with us. Uh, it's so fascinating to me. We are the ones who place so many limits on ourselves. We really are the ones who are putting ourselves tiny little boxes and I can't do XYZ and there's no way that I'd be able to do ABC. But is that true?
Mm-hmm.
And I love the point that you made about bold doesn't always have to be loud or you're leaping off a ledge or any of that. It can be quiet. It can be quietly stepping out into something that you've never done before, right?
Right? Doesn't need to be a post on social media. Like it just is your moment. And I do stand by that a lot of my bold moments have really happened between my ears, meaning like it's how I think, how I talk to myself, how I move through a challenge versus how I used to. Those are bold moments. Like I have had failures in the last 3.5 years that are big, 6-figure failures. And that's no joke when you're running a business, but it's how you move through it, what you do next, what did you learn from that, right? And then they always say to make 9 figures, you have to have an 8-figure mistake. It's like those types of things. Like you have to invest in yourself and like your learning. And I'm not saying go out and make multi-million-dollar mistakes. What I'm saying is you do have to try some things that aren't guaranteed. And I think that was one of the things that certainly I pivoted doing more for myself than I had before. And I want the book to help people understand it doesn't have to be money related. It can just be being curious. It could be writing it down. It could be sharing my goal with you. So I say, please help me stay accountable to me because I'm real good at being accountable to you, but to myself, sometimes I'm not as good at it. So I think it's really some of those small things that we can do, changing our routine, changing how we start the day, end the day, changing when we go to sleep, when we wake up. Like those are bold moves in someone's schedule to change things or to take time for themselves. Like someone who wants to get healthier, maybe just walking around the block once a day is a bold move. That's bold. And so don't define your boldness by anyone else's definition. It is yours and yours alone. And I think that's really important for people to understand.
Yes, Leigh. And that is such a great point. We often are comparing ourselves to what somebody else is doing and think that if we're not doing it that way, it's not really bold. And your point about just getting out and walking around the block, maybe that is a big deal for you. If
Yeah.
you are not even getting up and walking around your own home, walking around the block is going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
And so remembering to focus on ourselves and what we're doing and the small, medium, and large changes that we're making in our life is really more important than comparing it to what somebody else is doing.
Mhm.
Am I better today than I was yesterday? Am I making small steps that's progressing me forward that I wasn't doing yesterday? And
Yeah.
I think that's so important to remember. Yes.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you hear a lot, and I bet you hear this too in your show of I know what I need to do, but I'm not doing it. Well, there it
Mhm.
is right there. So it's that incremental. Like maybe I had this huge goal of I'm going to walk 15,000 steps a day. So 15,000 steps a day is a lot. So like on some days, I remember last December I had 146 steps, and I was just like, I'm so far off from that. And I was like, that was when I was like having those burnout moments come back up, and I'd lost a big contract, and I was just like, I gotta double down on everything I'm doing. And I literally only the steps were to my office, which is upstairs, and back downstairs. And I hadn't left the house Monday through Friday. I had literally smelled fresh air outside of our house. I had not gone outside. So just big red flags of, hey, you're getting into that burnout mode. But maybe I just need to instead of jacking up my goal, put it back down to something reasonable. Let's go with 3,000. And then when I hit 3,000, let me move it to 6 or 5. And I think sometimes I feel like I want to overachieve and have these stretch goals and all that, but sometimes you just need a goal that you can actually reach and achieve and then move on. So I think that was something too that I learned because I wasn't lowering my standard like I thought. Oh, if I lower it, I'm lowering like my expectations on myself. No, I'm giving myself the ability to actually be successful, which is a good thing. And so I think that's why I said even walking around the block was a big deal because it was like I got outside. And, now in the wintertime, I like take an hour for lunch, and we live in New Hampshire, so I ski. We have this loop, they call it the lazy loop. It doesn't feel lazy when you're on it, but it's flat, so that's why it's called lazy. So I do lazy loop, and then I come back in, and I feel so much more refreshed for the afternoon to really take it on. And I know that I've gotten outside too, so I don't have to do it at the end of the day when it's like pitch black in New England. So I think just thinking about your schedule and how you even approach it is a bold thing. But I think one of the boldest things you can do is just be open to doing something differently and then taking a step towards it.
Yeah. Excellent points, Leigh, for sure. Thank you for that. And you had mentioned earlier about aligning your life. And so
Mhm.
I want to explore this a little bit more.
Sure.
For the listeners, what does that mean, aligning your life, and how can we do that?
Right. Well, it starts with your values. If you say, I value my family and my relationships, are your actions actually aligned with your values? And doing a values check on, are you doing what you say that you are all about? And then if you're not, why? And then understanding kind of what you can do to change it. Oh, I'm working too much, or I'm working too many hours, or I believe in being creative. And that's one of my values is creativity and authenticity. Well, what are you doing in your life to be creative and authentic? And if you don't really have a list of more than one thing, or you can't think of anything, like, okay, how do you get back into realignment? It goes away from this sense of balance. For me, I don't use that word because balance inherently is a limited time. It's, if you think about a teeter totter, you're going to be balanced for a short period of time, and then, oops, you're going to go down or you're going to go up. That is what balance is. It's just not something that lasts. I think alignment you can get out of alignment, but I think alignment can be a time that lasts a little bit longer than balance, and then you can always get back to it. So it's the key of not ignoring it when it happens. So if you think about your car being misaligned, like you
Mhm.
take your hands off the steering wheel and it goes to the right, you're like, whoa, this needs aligned. Like you don't drive your car misaligned for months and months. If you do, you're going to damage your car, your tires, everything. It's going to be a bigger deal. You get that checked out. But sometimes in our life, like we're going right or we're going left and we just keep moving. And I think you end up being burnt out as an example, or you end up being unhappy or you're not living the life that you want to live. So that's the way that I look at alignment in our lives is like first starting with your values and your actions, and are they aligned with what you say you want to be?
Yeah. Thank you for that
Mhm.
explanation and that really great concept. an idea that I think many of us can relate to, and the alignment in our car and the wheel is turning a direction that's not the way you want to
Yeah,
go.
I don't want to go to
But
the right now.
but
Going up the
yet,
road. Yeah.
yeah, we do this with our life all the time,
Mhm.
right? We're maybe doing things that really aren't what's making us happy or taking us in the direction we want to go.
Mhm.
And so reevaluating what it is that's important to us, the things that we want to be doing in our life brings us back into alignment to take us the direction we want to go.
Mhm.
So I
Exactly.
love it. Yeah. Okay. I wanted to just have you share with us because you mentioned before in the show about your podcast,
Mhm.
and it's the Bold Lounge podcast. And I have listened to your show and I absolutely love it. You've had phenomenal guests on. And so I want you to share with the listeners what it is that you talk about on your show. Tell us maybe about some of the guests that you've had on, and is it weekly? Tell us all about it.
Sure, yeah. So it really came out of me wanting to amplify others. So the purpose of it is to amplify bold journeys, bold experience, and bold thinkers. And it started we're just going to celebrate 2 years, believe it or not, just coming up. We have over 100 episodes that have been published and over 250 that we've taped. And it's a very organic conversation that I have with each of the guests. I only ask two questions. First one is, what's your definition of bold? And then what's the second one is a memorable moment based on your definition. And then we have a really unplanned organic conversation about their leadership or their innovation or the book they wrote. And it's just been something that has been such a joy for me to meet these individuals who I think I never would have met if I didn't have the podcast, or I never would have been bold enough to even reach out to them, possibly if I didn't have the podcast. I mean, today I talk with Captain Sandy from Bravo's reality show. And so it was interesting to kind of just talk to her about Below Deck, but we were talking about leadership. And so just the experiences of some of the people that I've had and the joy that I get from being able to amplify their message and their journey, and something, really kind of going places that you might not know about that particular person or their experiences, or a resource book or an article or just an offering that someone has that will make other people's lives better or inspire people. That's really what the Bold Lounge podcast is all about.
Yeah, I love it, Leigh. And I mean, it speaks to my heart. Absolutely. I can totally relate because that is what this
Yeah.
podcast is about, is educating, inspiring, empowering, and really exposing people to new ideas and concepts and thoughts that maybe they would not have been otherwise. I love it. I love your show. I do enjoy listening to it. So it's weekly, yes?
Yes. Yeah. So weekly, and sometimes we drop two per week, but there's a minimum of one every Friday that we drop. And we've been doing it for 2 years, and we'll come in to celebrate my birthday in just a couple weeks.
And congratulations for that
Thank you.
and for the success that you've had with the show. And I want to just touch back on your book.
Okay.
And again, it is on pre-sale right now. November 19th, it will be out. But what was the experience of writing it? Was it easy for you to write the book? Was it challenging to write the book? Did you need a lot of editing? Was it something that you ever thought you would do before?
People used to say you should write a book to me a long time throughout my career. I would hear that a lot. And I think I've heard from my publisher, everyone has a book within them, but not everyone writes a book, right?
Mm.
So I felt like it was something I wanted to do, but I didn't know if I would ever act on it. So I think the seed was planted, but finding the right time to do it, which ended up being this time in my life in the last 2 years writing the book, it was not easy. So one of the challenges I had is I'm also working on my dissertation right now. So I am getting my doctorate. And so I'm in dissertation phase, which is very academic, highly academic writing. I came from healthcare, clinical research, highly academic institutions that I worked in, expectations to write academically as well. That was the hardest part for me, where, my editor would say to me over and over, this is too academic. This is too academic. Even my first blush out of the book and saying, this is what I think it would look like. And the response was, this is really boring and it reads like a textbook. And I'm like, well, isn't that good? So I had to work on that, which for me was a little frustrating because doing them at the same time, I didn't want my dissertation committee to say, "Whoa, this isn't academic enough." So it was this tug between that. I think the other thing I realized is that it's not an easy thing to do, so therefore not everyone's doing it. So I think I would learn things about myself or how I wrote, or wow, that's an example. I don't know if I want to put that in there, right? In the book. And so I think I had some moments of that. And then the last thing I'll say is that there is, as an author, you have to advocate for yourself. You have to advocate for what your intention of the book is, what your message of the book is, what you want it to look like, feel like, and what you want the reader to take away. And I think that's not always the easiest thing to do. And I think you don't want to come off as being too pushy or like you expect X, Y, or Z, or, that you're a prima donna. But this is your book with your name on that front cover. So you better be proud of it. It better align with what you want to write about. And for me, it better look like what my brand is and who I am and what people expect to see when they see my name on a book. So I think there was advocating that I had to do that I think was unexpected at times. But I'm so glad I did it. And I'm so excited about the book and when it comes out. And I'm not ready to write the second one. Someone said, "Are you gonna write another book?" And I was like, "I'd like to just get this one launched and just really live in the moment of my first book, and then we'll see what happens from there."
Yeah. Well, congratulations. And I'm excited for you and for this book as well. Thank you, Leigh, for sharing your thoughts on this with us, because the point about everybody has a book in them, but
Mhm.
not everybody writes it
Mhm.
is fabulous. I love that because we do all have stories, amazing stories, whether we think they are or not. And a lot of times we're just like, I'm just a regular person. Like, I don't have these grand things that have happened in my life, but
Mhm.
there is still life experience in there that is amazing and would make an amazing story. And so having some boldness and choosing to put that out
Yeah,
into
just
the
start with
world
a
is,
blog. Yeah,
yeah.
like, if you think you wanna write a book and you just wanna start letting it out, a single step that you could take is start writing a blog.
Mm,
And you could do things like with medium.com, or you don't even have to have your own website. Like, you could just start writing and putting yourself out there if you feel like that's something you want to do. And
mhm.
that's a step towards, a chapter, an outline of a book, or the next step, which would be writing your book.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Leigh. So before we close out, I would love to, as I have all my guests do, share your favorite books or podcasts that you have found influential or beneficial that you think the listener should check out.
Sure. One of the podcasts I listen to regularly is Mel Robbins. So I listen to
Mhm.
her podcast on a regular basis. One, she's a real deal, like what you see is what you get. And I think she is vulnerable, shares moments of strength and resilience, and well as, struggles that she has. And so I think that for me, that's someone I aspire to be like. And I hope I come off as real and I share things that went well and didn't go well. So that's definitely one. The book I'm reading right now is called, and it's right here, Big Little Breakthroughs: How Small Everyday Innovations Drive Oversized Results. So it's
Oh,
about the small steps that we take. That's Josh Linkner. And I just had him on my podcast, an incredible speaker. And he takes a concept and really simplifies it through his framework. And so
mhm.
that's someone that I'd highly recommend for people to pick up that book or to check him out.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I will for sure put the book and podcast in the show notes. I
Great.
love Mel Robbins' podcast as well. I
Yeah.
never miss an episode because you're absolutely right. She is real. She tells it real.
She's
And
bold.
yes, for sure. And all of her guests are phenomenal
Yeah. They're real
educators.
people. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So good stuff. Well, thank you for sharing those with us. And lastly, Leigh, where can the listeners find you? If they have questions, they want to follow your journey, they just want to be in your world, where would they be able to find you?
Yeah, so social media wise, the Leigh A. Burgess on Instagram, just started my Instagram there, so it's growing. So would love to have people follow me there. LinkedIn is really where I have a high followership, so check me out, Leigh Burgess on LinkedIn. And then my website, leighburgess.com, and you can sign up to be on the Bold Bulletin, which comes out regularly for you to know what we're doing in our events or where we're going to be, or just some of the new things coming out that are helpful for people to use as steps for their mindset, their wellness, and their next things that they want to do in their life.
I love it. Thank you. And I will put all that detail in the show notes for the listeners to easily find you. And congrats on the new Instagram. I'm going to go be sure I follow you right now.
Yeah, it grows slowly, but it's growth.
It is. Absolutely. That's the point to remember is that we don't harvest the fruit tomorrow when we planted the seed today, right?
Yeah, don't buy your followers. That's a recommendation I have to a lot of people. Is like someone told me the other day, is like, you could just buy your followers. I was like, no. I'm sure you can, but like, then who's following you? Like the whole point of having social media, which I think some people miss, it's not about a number, which I think can be a vanity metric. It's about the impact, who's following you that you are connecting with, and who are you getting fed back by. And I think that's really, really important on any level for you to realize that, whether it's your in-person relationships or social media, that they be genuine and thoughtfully grown. And so if this hits a good spot with you and you want to learn more, definitely do follow me. That would be great.
Yeah, great points, Leigh. Love it. Thank you so much for joining us on this show. I have so appreciated your time, and this information that you have shared with us has just been tremendously.
Thank you so much.
We'll talk more soon.
All right.
Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in to another insightful episode of the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. We appreciate your time and curiosity as we explore fascinating topics together. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to join us next week for another amazing episode. Remember, your journey of learning and growth is a continuous adventure, and we're thrilled to be part of it. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next week, stay curious and keep exploring those pockets of knowledge.